Welcome to the Good Grind Podcast. I am Chris Enroth, horticulture educator with the University of Illinois Extension, coming at you from Macomb, Illinois, and we have got a great show for you today. The ever-present cranberry. It has been a staple of this country since well before the Europeans showed up, part of the Native Americans' culture diet. Yes, American cranberry. That's what we're talking about today. And you know I'm not doing this by myself. I am joined, as always, every single week by horticulture educator Ken Johnson in Jacksonville. Hey, Ken.
Hello, Chris. It's one of the best times of year. Cranberries are showing up. Not that you can't find them year-round, but they're extra prevalent, I guess, this time of year.
That's right. Yes, I found my cranberries today, and I know also why you like this time of year, because people start playing Christmas music again, which I still say, boy, I'm one of those curmudgeons that say wait till after Thanksgiving before I get that Christmas music going.
I don't stop. So
yes, all year for Ken.
Christmas lights are up and.
He's so excited, everyone. It's favorite time of year. Oh, well, we have been going on some deep dives of cranberries, I think, this last week. Ken, you found us a great book to read. So we tried to read as much as possible. Like, I think we split it in half. You read the first half, I read the second half, and I got like halfway through the second half. I'll say that much, but
I got halfway through the first half.
There you go. So this podcast will be halfway there, not all quite the way. We'll do the other half next year. But yeah, let's talk about cranberries. And I guess kick us off, Ken, since you had the first half talking about sort of like the origination of this particular fruit. Tell us about what is the cranberry and the history of it.
Yeah, so cranberry is a native plant to the United States and Canada. So one of the, I guess, handful was the three main native fruits cultivated on kind of commercial level: cranberry, blueberry, and Concord grape. For our native fruits that we have in the U.S. There's others, but not really widely grown like these are. It is actually native to Illinois as well. So I think usually when people think of cranberries, they're thinking out northeast Massachusetts and stuff, but it is actually native to the upper Midwest, up into Canada. So in Illinois, it is native to the Chicago area. So it was at Cook Lake, McHenry, and Will counties. I don't know if you can find cranberries growing natively there anymore because you've never been up there. I'm not sure how many of the bogs still exist in those areas.
They've been paved over, or there's a 80-story skyscraper on top of them. So yeah, long gone.
Yeah. So these do grow in bog or wetlands, typically bog. So like in Massachusetts, I'm assuming other places as well, kind of these kettle bogs. So the glaciers came through, kind of scoured out these indentations in the ground. They can have a clay layer, which doesn't let water seep through at all or very quickly. And then that's over time been filled in with plant debris and created a bog. So this is where we're finding these a lot of times in those wet, kind of acidic conditions. And as far as the name cranberry, that comes from the flower. So the flower on these kind of looks like a sandhill crane. So originally the Europeans called them cranberries. Over time, somehow the E got dropped and we get our cranberries. And they have been harvested probably thousands of years by Indigenous Americans. Early settlers would harvest cranberries as well. This is going to be by hand. And in that book, so the book is America's Founding Fruit, the Cranberry in a New Environment by Susan Playfair. Got some interesting stuff in here on the chapter called The First Cultivators. So the Pilgrims, they actually had rules set out, ordinances in 1773 on how you could harvest cranberries. So any person that should be found gathering cranberries before the 20th of September exceeding 1 quart shall be liable to pay $1 and have the berries taken away. That they shall find any person gathering shall have them in the dollar, and any person should be found gathering cranberries on the Sabbath shall be liable to double punishment. So, I mean, they were quite desirable, and even some of the Native Americans, they also had rules about when you could pick. You couldn't pick unripe berries. You had to wait for a certain time to pick them as well. So they're kind of a high demand a crop. You know, they can keep for a long time. They're high in vitamin C. So, you know, we start getting into more colonial America with ships. You know, they're popular barrels of cranberries on ships, so you can get your vitamin C to prevent scurvy and stuff. Whereas like in England and stuff, they're using more limes. In the Americas, we're using cranberries a lot of times to get that vitamin C. And really, the first cultivation, how we think of as cultivating, like intentionally growing plants and caring for them instead of just harvesting or gathering them from the wild, began in 1812. And that was, what was his name? Henry Hall, who was a former schooner captain, noticed that cranberries that were growing by the sea would have sand blown in on them, and that would cause them to grow up. You have better production and stuff. So we actually started collecting the vines and planting them, fencing that area off to keep cattle off, and would sand them and stuff like that. And that kind of got the cranberry production started in Massachusetts. And then, you know, that more and more people saw that, got interested. People in New Jersey had similar growing conditions, also had native cranberries, started it, and they were bringing some of the, I guess, varieties from Massachusetts, because as people were harvesting, they're selecting ones that have bigger berries, darker colors, different desirable characteristics, and some of those we're still using nowadays from some of these varieties that were chosen from back in the 1800s. Started bringing those down to New Jersey and growing them. And then eventually it's kind of moving out into Wisconsin and the West Coast as well. So, you know, I think typically, again, when people think of cranberries, I think of Massachusetts, but Wisconsin is actually the largest producer. About 60% of the cranberries grown in the U.S. are grown in Wisconsin, kind of in central Wisconsin is the main area there. And I think they're the largest producer in the world, because really there's not a whole lot of production outside the U.S. Massachusetts is about 25-ish%. And then we have Oregon, Washington, and New Jersey also will raise cranberries commercially. And one thing I saw, you know, reading about this, there's not like a tremendous amount of growers. I mean, it's maybe several hundred. I mean, several hundred people doing this, but you know, it's not a a massive scale like you see some of these other crops, apples, specialty crops and stuff. There's this fairly limited size when you think about kind of the number of growers and even the acreage being used for this.
Yeah, it was an interesting dive into history. I will say that much. It went into the formation of all of these cranberry growers associations to try to protect some of these farmers, which did kind of consolidate a lot of the growing in these various different groups. And so there's really only a handful of like organized organizations, kind of umbrella organizations that these growers fall under. Probably the most popular one of those is going to be Ocean Spray, which is actually founded by not a farmer, but a lawyer, founded Ocean Spray. And sort of to get around some of the antitrust laws, because they really just started bringing all of these farmers together into one group. This happened really right around the Great Depression, right when antitrust laws were in full effect. And so there is an exemption, though, for agriculture. And so then the lawyer then said, we are all ag, we're all farmers. So now we're exempt from these antitrust laws. And I think I'm drawing this line in my own head, but it seems like a lot of the cranberry grower farmers, a lot of the processing, a lot of the cleaning, the packaging, all of that happens post-harvest, that all also happens on the farm. And so I wonder if that's all part of the we're all farmers, we're not canners, we're not we're all farming this. So I wonder if that's part of it. But a lot of the cranberry growing is kind of concentrated in just a handful of people and groups.
Yeah, and since they need those kind of those specialized conditions, you're kind of limited to where you can grow them to begin with
Mhm.
as well. And in this book, they're talking about a lot of these are not terribly large acreage that they're growing these on. It maybe a handful, 20, 30 acres, something like that. These aren't massive necessarily. At least the people they were talking to and that she was talking to in this book are not massive operations. I'm sure there's
Yeah.
some out there, but a lot of them are more that family farm type level.
Hmm. But and in the beginning, Ken, a lot of these were dry harvested, as you mentioned, and then kind of that thing um, that Ocean Spray and two other actual there's so there's three of these associations they figured out. Um, if we could process these, maybe we could sell them at a different time of year. And so, really, in the 1930s, it's when a lot of people started shifting away from doing a lot of their own processing at home. It began to shift from jars to canning, like in tin cans. And so people were going to the store and buying canned goods more frequently at that point in time. And then it really started to ramp up once we got, 30s, 40s. And then everything was found in the grocery store. And that one story that I read in my part of the book was that in old country stores, it was very common for there to be a barrel of cranberries by the cash register, and these would have been dry harvested, which they last longer. They have better storage capacity for that, and so they would sit there at the counter. The customer would come up, say, "I want a pound." The shopkeeper would take their big scoop, kind of weigh it out or eyeball it sometimes, and then they could banter or argue about if that's actually a pound of cranberries, all that, and so. But then all of this processing work going to happen, and then they started prepackaging cranberries, fresh cranberries in this case, and then that barrel of cranberries disappeared, and then they started seeing these prepackaged cranberries show up in other parts of the store, and then grocery stores started popping up, and then these canned goods started popping into the grocery stores. These cranberry sauces. And then, but anyway, the story basically kind of went on to say the disappearance of the cranberry was the first nail in the coffin of the old country store. So I don't know if that's necessarily true or not, but that's how they told the story. That's how they spun the yarn.
Everything goes back to cranberries.
I guess so. Yeah.
And we talked, I think we'll talk about harvest more, but really like when we're first, you know, going out and just harvesting wild, doing this by hand. And then as we start getting into more of the cultivation of it, that's when we start getting into the rakes and stuff. And so you get faster harvest. It's still really slow compared to
Mm-hmm.
the water that's done now. But yeah, even then, they still have kind of these advances on harvesting and getting more of it and stuff.
And you mentioned Wisconsin has a lot of uh, cranberry growers, and you had found that there's actually tours you can take in like September, October in Wisconsin while they're harvesting. So folks check out, like, I think it's the Wisconsin Cranberry Growers Association. You can find where they're harvesting cranberries up in Wisconsin and go visit them.
Yeah, Massachusetts has it too, but Wisconsin's a lot closer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And the interesting thing, again, there's these different umbrella corporations. The biggest, probably the most well-known one is going to be Ocean Spray. And when a farmer basically enters into a grower contract with Ocean Spray says we want 100% of your cranberries. So they have to negotiate for that farm store, that farmstead, that agritourism side of cranberries that then they're allowed to then pull and sell. And so that, again, very interesting read. Yeah. We'll put the title of this book down below so folks can pursue it.
yeah, I think I will actually try to finish this book instead of
Yep, me
leaving it
too.
a quarter read.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And I will say it does have, I haven't really looked through there. It does have a recipe section at the end. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and there's quite a few of them in there.
It does have some like really interesting quotes also at the beginning of every chapter. I will share my favorite. And it is about the harvesting process. This is on chapter 9. And it equates cranberries to cats. So I'll just read this quote to you. Um, the cranberry submits to cultivation, but it retains that savor of wilderness that is its birthright. It cherishes that as a cat, its spirit of independence. There are little things as well as great that cannot be tamed, cranberries and cats, as well as winds and waters. This was written by Cornelius Wagant from the piece Down Jersey in 1940. So I will say, oddly enough, when I read that quote, I had a cat on my lap at home. So now I'm eating cranberries. So, that this untamable cultivated plant and animal.
So I think we've kind of covered this, right? And there's a lot more to it, but we're just kind of giving you the dirt. I don't even know if this qualifies as the Cliff's Notes version of it, but
This is part one of a 10-part episode on just the history of cranberries. There's a lot there, probably.
Yeah. So I think one thing to talk about, we mentioned harvest and how they're done by water. So basically, the fields will be flooded. They have a machine come through. A lot of places people describe it as kind of like an egg beater, and it just stirs up all the berries, and the berries float, which is important. That's the reason why we can flood the fields to do this, and that is because if you've never seen a fresh cranberry, you can buy them this time of year. I think we both have identical bags of cranberries.
Yes, we do.
They're just little red. Some of them can be really dark red, almost black, to lighter red, and some of them, the little more white ones are probably aren't quite as ripe. But if you cut one open, we got these, and we can take a picture of this to put it in. It's probably not gonna be able to see very well in the video, but
Yeah.
you got these 4 chambers in here that are filled with air, and that's what allows them to float, and the reason why the bogs can be flooded in order to harvest them.
Yeah, the different colors. I that was a very neat part of this book, where they talked about the different colors. Sometimes you'll see like the whitish cranberry, and so here there's like a dark side and there's a lighter color side. They said sometimes that coloration difference is just part of that fruit. Might have been buried a little bit, might have been hidden underneath a leaf, or might have been just on the bottom side of the plant. And the part that was more exposed to the sun's usually a darker red. Some of the interesting things about like when you do wet harvest versus dry harvest, like the wet harvest, they really have a certain window they need to get it all done. Dry harvest, you still have a window to get it done, but it seemed like they could push that window a little bit later when the more berries would be ripe, more darker red. And some of them that are grown like out in Oregon, they can really push that window pretty late because of their more moderate climate that they have, and they can get sometimes a much more sweeter berry. Because I don't know, Ken, have you tried your cranberries yet? In terms of flavor profile, what are we talking here?
I've put a dent on my bag here.
Here you go. It's like popcorn.
I'll say there's a reason. There's usually a lot of sugar added to cranberry products. They are rather tart. And even then, eating through these berries, some of them are a little sweeter than others. Again, I think usually the darker ones, at least the ones I've eaten, tend to be a little bit sweeter, not quite as tart. Don't pucker quite so much.
I've had just been eating the darker red ones. I'm gonna try this lighter color one. I also have a piece of chocolate, which I will tell you folks, if you're just eating raw cranberries and you got a bar of chocolate nearby, take a little nibble of chocolate every time. It is really good. It is delicious. I'll try the white one. Yeah, there's definitely some tartness to the lighter colored ones.
You got to power through that.
Yep. All right. Well, chocolate.
With the dry harvest, from what I've read, they wait until those plants are completely dry. So if you have a dew or something like that, they're letting those go completely dry before they harvest. Because when they're wet, the wet harvest, that's going to reduce the the shelf life of them. So the ones we're getting in the bags, those are all dry harvested,
Yeah.
and that's only like 5% or something like that of the cranberries are grown in the U.S. Only like 5% are dry harvested for that
Hmm.
fresh market.
Yeah. So that wet harvest cranberry is really, it's for that processing market. And it was that attempt to expand beyond Christmas and Thanksgiving, I think, for the cranberry growers, because they wanted to try to sell or offer something at different times of the year. And they would routinely say, "Oh, we are just stuck, at least in the United States, at Thanksgiving. We're kind of stuck a little bit at Christmas." But then they started to market this globally, and they have had a lot more success. Now, Ken, you had already mentioned their big buyers that they have over in Europe. I think Germany's one of the biggest one over in Europe. China's becoming very popular of a buyer. I think growers are getting a little nervous once China figures out that they can grow this too. They don't need to buy from us. But that global market has really expanded and kind of necessitated this wet harvesting method. And so, but yes, dry harvest gives you that fresh berry. It allows you to make your own cranberry sauce if you wanted to. And I think it is pretty neat to have just like that berry in hand. And they do keep. I think what the number I read is they keep for like 3-ish months, sometimes longer. The dry harvested berry, but the wet harvested one lasts maybe 3 weeks until they're moldy and mushy and they're no good anymore.
That wet harvest, you've got that wheel, that bar spinning, and that's gonna bruise them and stuff. And I'm sure just sitting in water probably doesn't help all that much either.
It's a vector for bacteria and fungus.
But I will say, speaking of processed cranberries, the best cranberries, they have lines in them.
Ken just held up a can of cranberry sauce for those listening.
The jellied cranberry sauce, not the chunky stuff. It's got to be nice and smooth.
Yeah,
just don't look at the ingredients and the amount of sugar in there.
Yeah, you get your day's allotment of sugar, and one serving, and folks, one serving is not the entire can. We found that one out too as Ken was reading the ingredients before we started recording.
Yes, for the particular can I have, it is 6 servings per container, and one serving is 48% of the sugars for a 2,000 calorie diet. So keep that in mind this Thanksgiving.
Yes. Load me up on that cranberry jelly. I will share. So we do have a nutrition wellness team. And so they do have some recipes. And one of those recipes was for cranberry pumpkin muffins. Actually, it sounds really good. So I think these are going to be something that we're going to try. And it uses dried cranberries. I think when you go to the store, you'll find dried cranberries. More often than not, they're going to be dried sweetened cranberries. And so these are cranberries they've just been sweetened, of course, with sugar. I think this particular one, though, it calls for dried unsweetened cranberries if you can find that. If you can't, you can also use fresh or frozen cranberries as well. So I'll throw that recipe down below.
I don't know if I've ever seen unsweetened dried cranberries. I don't know if I've ever looked either, but
it's just a pucker in a bag. I mean, that was the thing that made dried cranberries so popular. Was back in the day, people used to love to eat raisins. So then the cranberry growers were like, "Hey, we can do that too. We just add a little bit of sugar, and we have our craisins? Is that what they called them? Yeah, that was a big thing. I guess anything else we want to talk about with the cranberry fruit? I did wonder, because whenever you get the jelly or whenever you make the sauce itself, it's always red, bright red. But when you look at the flesh, it's white and it's crispy like an apple. I always thought it was interesting that red coloration doesn't go. It's just skin deep. It doesn't go through to the flesh. And there's plenty of seeds in these too, which don't really bother me when I'm eating them. I don't know if they bother you, Ken, but yeah.
No, you don't really even notice them.
Mm-mm.
I should say these are related. They're in the same genus as blueberries.
Both bog type plants.
I don't know. Yes, I'm
Is that
not
the,
sure how that fits into anything, but
I don't
they're
know. Is
related.
that the Ericaceae family? I can't remember. I used to know these things
It's
when you don't have
Vicinium.
to know them. What is it?
Vicinium is the genus.
The
I don't know.
Sinium?
I don't know. Or vaccine. I don't know how to pronounce it. Vaccinium. Yeah, Ericaceae.
Ericaceae. I want to know who Eric was, that he got a whole family of cool plants named after him. Okay, so we did talk about sort of the history, the background of blueberries. Thinking blueberries now, Ken. Cranberries, or the anatomical makeup. Atomical, is that a thing? Uh, the anatomy of a cranberry, where it has those hollow chambers, it allows it to float. Works great for wet harvesting. Um, the other thing is in the book that we read, Ken, it really seems to talk about the boom and bust of the cranberry life. That again, we are really focused on a particular season where a lot of the cranberries being used are used for like a month out of the year, at least in the U.S. There's other byproducts that are also used, other food additives, trail mixes, things that you might find cranberries in. But the bulk that we think about for our cranberries is Thanksgiving, really. Um, and so, if you're a farmer, though, your goal is to get more yield out of maybe the same amount of land. Maybe you expand, but the idea is you want more yield. Like all farmers, that's like what they do. Like that is their life's goal: more yield, same amount of land. Try to do less inputs. But when you are so constricted to such a seasonal product like the cranberry, they really get hit hard in these boom and bust years where cranberries sometimes are just flooding the market. The supply is just way beyond the demand that exists, and so this has been something that has been happening. And there was recently a bust around the turn of the century, once we entered the 21st century, around like 1998 ish, 2000. A big bust year for cranberries, bust a couple years for cranberry growers. So, um, I just think that that is just more kind of inspiration for these growers to process these berries into other things that can be used throughout the year and shipped then across the planet.
Yeah, I know the parts I read too. Some of the growers she's talking with and following along, a lot of them have jobs outside the farm too.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have necessarily the acreage to do just cranberries.
Right. Yeah. So I guess, Ken, maybe we should like go through a year at a commercial cranberry farm and see what that is like. Um, I don't know. Did your section get much into like this annual cycle of cranberry growing from the farmer's perspective?
Yeah, so the parts I read, they're talking a lot about planting. So
Mm-hmm.
they were maybe renovating a bed or something like that. So we will talk about that and then get into the cycle.
Yeah, sure.
So with
Mm-hmm.
this, so with these, basically they'll go in and so you've got an old field that you want to plant. And some of these can be 100 plus years old. Uh, I don't know if the plants themselves are actually 100 years old, but they were planted 100 years ago, and they haven't been replanted, stuff like that. So say they want to go in, yields are declining, they want to put something new in. They'll go in, they'll level out the ground so it's nice and flat. A lot of times they'll square off the fields so it's easier to harvest and stuff. And they'll come in and they put sand down, a couple inch layers of sand. And some of the videos I've seen, that you basically have this. A lot of times they'll do cuttings of them, or they'll just have the vines with the roots on them, and they'll just kind of go out and sprinkle them on the field. It's like they're spreading, feeding chickens, that kind of that motion, just like they're almost like spreading mulch
Yep.
across this. And they're coming through. At least one of the videos I watched, coming through with basically a tractor that's got some small discs on the front, and that's pushing those plants into the sand. There's a roller bar behind it to smooth everything out. And there you go. It's much more kind of time consuming than how I just described it. But that's
Mhm.
basically what they're doing. They're pushing those those vines into the ground so they'll root down it through that sand into the soil beneath. So they're going to have to keep up with the watering until that happens. And they've got irrigation running through there for frost protection, for irrigating during the growing season, which we can get into. And a lot of it's becoming more and more automated.
I saw that it reminded me of, so there's a technique for like establishing turf grass with like warm season grasses. It's called sprigging, or stolonizing. And it is essentially that process. You take like the zoysia grass, you just basically tear up a whole thing of zoysia grass, and then you just spread it out on a prepared soil surface. And you could like put it in trenches, or you can disc it in, or you could top dress with compost or something. But that is almost the exact same thing that they're doing here. In my head, I was kind of thinking like, oh, well, they must have like people out there planting individual plants. Nope. They are just scattering plant debris, plant vines on the ground, and letting them root themselves into this prepared sand bed. It was pretty neat. And you mentioned like the squared off fields. It's like a giant sand volleyball pit, for giants. There's this big, long, look like they're bigger than football fields. Maybe, I don't know. I didn't get any dimensions on them, but they're just very big sand fields.
So I will say in this book, one of the people she was talking with, I think they were rooting the cuttings and then putting them in the ground. So I got the sense that a lot of the people are doing more like the vines, or they had what you described, the kind of the cut up things, and they're spreading that out. And these vines can get 6 feet long, something like that. So they'll fill in that area.
So if you, like a lot of commercial growers, if you're going to do the wet harvest, a lot of them are going to have like an irrigation trench surrounding this field. So you're sort of up here on a levee, you go down into this irrigation trench, and then then you come back up onto this like plateau of what that field is. But where does all that water come from that they have to flood that bog with when they go to harvest? So one of the, I think a neat thing, and this is something that the cranberry growers, they sort of like to promote, is that for every acre of cranberries in production, it takes 7 acres of water storage, or sort of like habitat space, wetland space. And so they say that cranberries can contribute to increased habitat around their farms, because they're at a ratio of basically 7-to-1 of water storage area to planted cranberry field. So I think that sounds like a pretty neat way to go about growing a crop.
Yeah, it's not wall to wall cranberries.
Yeah. 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 A lot of the farms, they talk about all of the wildlife on there, and which is, they said, is good and bad. It's
Double-edged sword.
That's right.
So yeah, so this is the spring. So there's a lot of this planting is taking place in the spring, and then we're watering to get those plants established. And if this is a mature field, the watering is needed. I think it's like a lot of things, about an inch of water through rain or irrigation is what these plants are going to need. Then going into the summer, we start seeing flowering taking place. That's early June, depending on where in the country you're at, but most of these are more northern locales. So June timeframe, again, we've got those flowers that kind of look like a crane. And then I've read conflicting things on this. Some places will say that cranberries can pollinate themselves, but they're not very efficient. Others saying they can't pollinate themselves at all. So I don't know what the truth is, but regardless, insects are going to be important. So a lot of growers are bringing in managed hives, so honeybees. Some we're bringing in bumblebees, and bumblebees are going to be much more efficient at pollinating cranberries. Our native bumblebee species evolved with cranberries and stuff, and they'll do that buzz pollination, the sonication, where they vibrate their bodies, vibrate the flowers, that releases the pollen. That's going to be much more efficient than honeybees, which don't do that. But honeybees kind of make up for that in just sheer numbers. I've saw some stuff where you've got a lot of these growers in those areas, those 7 acres where you're not growing cranberries, where you're putting in pollinator habitat,
Mhm.
so you can get more of those. Not necessarily have to bring in managed bees, maybe quite so much.
The thing that I read also was, especially up in Wisconsin, where you do have a lot of this habitat, they would bring in these honeybee hives, and the other plant that's also blooming at the same time as cranberries is buckthorn, non-native invasive species, and it has a much. You mentioned that odd, awkward shaped flower. Buckthorn has a very easy flower for bees to access the pollen nectar reward. So the cranberry growers are saying all of our bees, that honeybees that we're bringing in, they're going over and pollinating the buckthorn. They're not pollinating the cranberries. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to cultivate maybe pollinator habitat that you would have adjacent to your property, because they're going to have to control the invasive species anyway, because they're competing now for that pollination of your crop.
And I read some stuff about it. They got to get the timing right. This is more Massachusetts, but I assume it'd be other places too. That if you bring your hives in too early and there's no flowers out there, they're going to find something else, and they're not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
going to come back to those cranberries because they don't necessarily have a lot of that nectar, some of those resources that the
Yeah.
bees want. So you got to get the timing right. I think they were saying about 5% of the flowers, got 5% flowering. That's when you want to bring the hives in, so you're not
Mm-hmm.
losing those bees to other places. So then after you get that pollination, we're going to have the fruit starting to develop, and they'll start green, and then they'll start transitioning into white. And then late summer, we're starting to get our shifting from green into that red color that we are most familiar with.
And then the fun time, harvest, fall. Um, so I guess this sort of depends whether you're going to do a dry harvest or a wet harvest. Um, it did seem like a lot of the organically grown cranberries were doing dry harvest. Um, and a lot of their buyers were sort of those very big organic markets, like Whole Foods and those popular chain stores that sell that are known for selling organic products. Um, that takes a lot more labor, um, but so for if you're doing wet harvest, you're basically going to be getting started. What was it, like kind of late September into October? And you would begin flooding your field. You run that egg beater machine that you described, Ken, and it essentially rakes the vines, loosens the berries, and they float because they got those chambers inside of them. Um, which also, I guess, that was the seed dispersal method for the plant itself, since it's kind of bitter. It wasn't relying necessarily on wildlife; it was relying more on flowing water. That's kind of an interesting way to do it. So there you go, cranberry seed dispersal method, water. Um, so the machine loosens the berries, they float, and then the berries are then gathered either by another harvesting machine. Um, that Ken mentioned, a lot of this is becoming very automated anymore, or you see people hand floating these towards an elevator at the corner of that bog, which then pulls the cranberries out, puts them on semi trucks and moves them. So I think a lot of us, myself included, when I thought of cranberries being harvested, I think of that wet method with people pushing these big long boards or plastic boards, pushing them towards this part of the bog where the machine takes it out. But that's what I have in my head.
Yeah, they're the big floats that
Yeah.
they're dragging along. Yeah, and they've got that basically a big vacuum, more or less, just
Yeah.
sucking them out into the truck. Which will then take them off to the plant and stuff. And for your dry harvest, traditionally that was done basically with wooden rakes. Think like a
Mm-hmm.
hairbrush, like a pick. Have all these really small tines, so you can
Mm-hmm.
scoop that, and it's got kind of a scoop on the back, so you can collect the berries. You just take that, rake that over the plants. The stems and the leaves will pass through there, pop off the berries. You dump them. Nowadays, the machine kind of looks like maybe a lawnmower or a sod cutter, if you're familiar with what those look like. And it's kind of got the same thing, those tines, and it's just raking those up tossing them into a bag or something like that, and then they'll take those bags off, put a new bag on, and keep going. So even the dry harvest has become mechanized, and you don't need
Mhm.
an army of people to go out and harvest by hand like you would, 200 years ago.
Yeah, they'd be on their hands and knees picking and combing, and
Yeah.
yep, yeah. Um, and so for the wet harvest, once they finish, they vacuumed up all the cranberries off of the water. That field is then drained. They filter that water and they move it on to the next bog in their harvesting process, and that's just the cycle. Then continues until everything's picked for that year. But they're not done yet. There is more.
Yeah. So then moving into the winter. So in December, a lot of times the fields will be flooded. That's going to keep plants from desiccating, protect them from really cold temperatures because these are evergreen plants. So they're going to retain their leaves. So they'll flood those. A lot of times that will freeze. They're encased in ice that's going to insulate them, protect them from those cold temperatures. And then one part that I didn't know about this until we started looking into this is that we'll go through and sand the fields every 3 or 4 years. So basically, what they're going to do, a lot of times they're doing this when on ice. So once the ice gets 3 to 4 inches thick and they can drive heavy machinery on there, more or less, they'll drop anywhere from a half inch to an inch or so of sand on that ice. And then when that melts, that's going to drop down onto the plants. It can also be done. Again, I've seen videos of basically they're just blowing it onto there, or they'll drive machinery through, but they'll sand these fields every 3 or 4 years. And that sand is going to kind of smother the vines and force them to grow up. And that vertical growth is what's going to produce the fruit. So if you just let them grow on the ground, you're not going to have as much fruit production. The sanding is also going to help with some pest management. If you've got foliar diseases, putting that sand down is going to bury that potentially. There's minerals and stuff in that sand, so you can be providing some nutrients to the plants as well. But then the timing and how much you put on there is going to be critical. I mentioned in the book, too early or too much or too late and too little can have some effects. So, but they are going to do that, and that's again that natural process we talked about in 1812 when they noticed that sand from the dunes being blown on the fields. So this is a natural process this process naturally happens, and we're just doing it, in a more managed
Mhm.
way nowadays. And then, as things start melting, they'll drain the fields, and sometimes they will do a late flooding. Again, this can help with pest management. This is not an every year thing. I think it's every few years, every 3 years, something like that. Maybe they'll do this, but they will also set up irrigation. We start getting into late winter and stuff. When we start, those plants are maybe going to start growing again, setting up irrigation so that they can mist plants if we start getting late frost. If you're familiar with citrus down in Florida, they'll do this, or strawberries in Florida. They will run irrigation, and as the water freezes, it releases a little bit of heat. It's kind of counterintuitive, but as long as you keep adding that water and it keeps freezing, it's going to protect the buds and stuff on those plants and prevent them from getting killed. And so some places reference that they may run in this irrigation 20, 30 times a year in the winter and spring in Massachusetts and stuff to protect from these freezes, because you freeze out, you lost your crop. And in this book, they talk about, basically it's a 16-month growing cycle. So like your new buds are forming while you got flowers on the plant. So you get a real bad one, you could wipe out maybe subsequent crops too, depending
Yeah.
on when the freeze and stuff is. So frost protection is a really big thing for cranberry bogs. And that's where the automation comes in, where they've got sensors. They can tell when temperatures are getting too low. They can kick that on, from their phone. They're not having to go out at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning to do all this.
Potentially losing 2 seasons worth of crop. That sounds pretty scary. Because peach growers, they do something similar when they get these late frosts. They will irrigate their trees with that heat effect from the ice forming. But they have 1 year's crop they got to worry about right then, not 2 years. That would be, yeah, a little bit more dicey. Well, Ken, you've found this great book. You've got me reading again. I've been looking into all these different cranberry things. I now want to grow these. I want to grow these in my backyard. I'm growing blueberries very successfully, and I want to add a family member from the blueberries. Maybe I'll put them right near each other. And so, yeah, can I do this in my backyard? Can I grow cranberries?
Yeah, you probably could. So yeah, again, you're going to be, depending on what your soil pH is like, you're going to be amending it because again, they're like those acidic soils was 4.5, 5, somewhere in there. 4 to 5.5 is what they want, and maybe the soil is a little bit sandier. So you found a few references where if you've got, let's say for most of Illinois, we're going to have heavier soils. You dig out 8 inches. Some places will say put some kind of plastic liner down and poke holes in it, again, to help retain some of that moisture. I'm thinking, if I were to try this, I may just get one of those plastic preformed pond liners. I don't know if they make nice square ones, but you may have a kidney shaped planting of this. But then you're going to put your peat moss, and they're saying 4 bales per 50 square feet. You can mix in bone meal, rock phosphate, blood meal, Epsom salts in with that to kind of get some of your fertility in there. And then you put your plants in there, and then you could top that with sand. But you're going to have to do some soil amending. We did find one. Who is that from? Massachusetts Cranberries. So they make your own bog in a cup. So with this, they're doing a 1/2 inch layer of clay at the bottom, about a 1/2 inch layer of gravel, 3/4 inch layer of peat or potting soil, and about 1 inch of sand, and then you put your cranberry cutting into that. And that's kind of mimicking those kettle bogs. You got the gravelly and then your organic matter on there. So with some amending, I think we would have enough cold so that they would get there. So they need that chilling time as well to properly produce. So I think we would have the right conditions to do it.
Yeah. I'd like to give it a try. So I think I will. And I think in a previous show I shared that the pH of my soil in the backyard is 5.5. So I might be well on my way to growing
there.
Cranberries. Yeah. Yeah. Don't need to fight the pH as much. I was thinking about, again, growing cranberries in a yard, or maybe folks in Southern Illinois, whereas maybe we get warmer winters, how might that relate? And it is interesting to see the diverse landscapes that these cranberries grow in, everywhere from New England, Wisconsin, which seems like the harshest of all the environments, Wisconsin winters I'm thinking about. But then in Oregon, they'll grow throughout the northeast or northwest, and on the south coast of Oregon, the average summer temperature is 59 degrees Fahrenheit. That sounds amazing. But their winter average temperature is 42 degrees Fahrenheit. And they still grow cranberries out there fairly successfully. It is a little bit more windy out there, but because you have such a low growing crop, you can pretty much build some kind of windbreak, either out of plants, trees, or structure to protect it from any excessively drying winds. And the Oregon growers, they're usually 4 to 6 weeks ahead of the Wisconsin growers. So, I'd say, folks, if you aren't interested and you're not sure if your climate's quite right, maybe give it a try. I mean, the desert Southwest probably will struggle. The Southeast U.S. might be a little too warm for these guys. But Southern Illinois folks, I'm thinking about you. Maybe give it a try. I lived there a long time ago. It seems like now, and it got cold sometimes.
Yeah, I don't think you have to get there chilling. It doesn't have to get down below freezing. I think if you're in the 40s for a couple months, you should be should be okay. So I haven't done an extensive amount of research into this, but just looking before the show a little bit, trying to source plant material may be a little difficult. You need to make sure if you're looking for cranberry plants, you're not getting a viburnum. You're actually getting the vaccinium, because there's a cranberry bush viburnum. A lot of the stuff that's popping up when you search cranberry plants for sale is viburnum. So double check the plant description before you buy something.
That gets into really murky territory, because there's a European cranberry viburnum as well that can be easily mistaken in a nursery. Actually, we had a restoration project where they were hoping to plant American cranberry viburnum, and the nursery sold them the wrong one. And the European one is quite aggressive and difficult to kill. Might even become invasive one day. I don't know, but it was a nasty one out there. So yeah, I guess take a close look. That's only a better reason for us, Ken, to go tour these cranberry farms next fall, and talk to them. Grab some cuttings from them or something. All legally, all above the table, of course.
Yeah, I'm assuming you can grow from seed. I don't know how tricky that would be, but it may take a while, because I know for commercially, when they're putting new fields in, it's usually 2 or 3 years before they're harvesting. So.
Yeah, in the chapter of the book I'm reading right now, it's about hybrid development. I mean, we're talking anywhere from 8 to 15 years before, a hybrid gets discovered or created to it's in its first field. So it's a long time. I think probably because most cranberry fields are being planted with asexual cuttings out there from the mother plant. I'm guessing that there's probably going to be a lot of variability in these seeds. It's going to be like planting a pumpkin seed. Don't know what you're going to get there in the next year.
You could have the next great.
You could.
Cultivar.
Or you could have the most bitter cranberry ever known.
Just have to wait a few years to find out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm not sure if you have to cold stratify or not. But.
Still a lot more to learn. We could probably go on for another hour, Ken, with all the stuff that we've gone through. But maybe we should cut it off here. I also got to figure out how am I going to flood my cranberries in the winter, because it's right by my house. I don't want to flood my house. So maybe a pond liner. There you go.
Pond.
There you go. I'll have to raise the lip up a little bit higher.
I was enough to get a skating rink.
Oh, yeah, that would be nice. It doesn't get that cold here anymore, though. It doesn't freeze like it used to. So anyway, yeah, that's a future me problem. Well, that was a lot of great information about cranberries, and we'll have more info down below. Ken, you wrote a great blog article about cranberries also a few years ago, so I think that was super informative as well. So definitely include that one in there. So. Well, the Good Growing Podcast is a production of University of Illinois Extension, edited this week by Ken Johnson. Ken, thank you for hanging out with me, sharing all of these excellent cranberry resources. This is a great book, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Everybody go out and enjoy some cranberries this Thanksgiving and December and throughout the year. It doesn't have to be just this time of year.
Get your canned cranberries all year long. The fresh ones might not be all year, but yeah, take your cranberry, get your piece of chocolate. I think this is delicious. This is my favorite thing ever. Although the book did talk about vodka and cranberries too, so maybe I'll try that after the show.
Good growing after dark.
That's right.
And let's do this again next week.
Oh, we shall do this again next week. Oh my goodness, it's the eating season. What I like to call it, Thanksgiving is coming up, along with a couple other events. So Ken and I, we're going to be off gallivanting around the state of Illinois, just having fun, learning, and then eating turkey, or whatever bird you like to eat, Ken, a hooved animal, I don't know. So we're gonna have some garden bites coming at you these next couple of weeks. So, well, listeners, thank you for doing what you do best, and that is listening. Or if you've watched us on YouTube, watching, and as always, keep on growing. Well, listen, or blah, 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 blah. Yeah, there we go. That cranberry's getting to me. No vodka yet. Well, listeners, thank you for doing what you do best, and that is listening. Or if you're watched us on YouTube, watching, I said that wrong.